must be a Monday. Why? Because I have this headset on, I have a microphone, and I'm here. So that means it's time for the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris, happy to be here with you, and this is the Journey 2020 where we've been coming to you. We used to come to you on a Friday. That was back when I was with Dr. Robinson, who came up with the idea and the whole concept of the Journey 2020. And we did our thing for about 4 or 5 years. And then he said, well, Charles, I'm a little busy. And so we switched to Monday at some point in time. And here we are. And been going solo now for quite a while. And again, this is the Journey 2020 coming off of the weekend. And we're now in the month of May, kind of sort of halfway of in the year 2023, and how quickly time flies here, as we will talk about that a little later. So here on the Journey 2020, as Dr. Robinson, who used to say, the journey is from me to you and from you to me, so we can reach a higher level, and that's what we try to do here on the Journey 2020. And our guest for today, I told him that I hadn't had him on in a while, but he's always willing to come on, and we talk about certain things. And I'm always intrigued because anytime that I'm able to talk to a police officer and he's able to share an insight, one of my mentors, who I'm very close to, is a former police officer that, out of New York City. And through all this madness and all this other stuff that's been going on for a period of time, it's always, I don't quite know the words, but I think in a way, and I'll ask him about this, do our culture really accept what has always been going on since the beginning of time, in the sense of how we see law enforcement, how we see ourselves pertaining to law enforcement, but more importantly, the bigger picture, and will we, the people who are we supposed to be served, see anything differently, and will we fight even stronger for what we think is right? But that's part of what I want to talk about today. But first, I just want to invite James Crawford. Welcome back to the Journey 2020. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Charles. How are you?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to give you my condolences because I know you've been going through a lot the last week or so, and so sorry to hear about your sister.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And your sister was where, and how old was your sister?
She is the baby. She's 74.
Okay,
She's
okay,
number 12 out of 12
okay. All right, all right. And she was living where?
in Grand Rapids, Michigan,
Wow.
where all of us were born. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Um, Other than the trips you have been making recently, how often do you go up there?
Say it again.
How often do you travel up to Grand Michigan?
How we see each other?
Yeah, family.
Not very much because we're all over the country. Of
Mm-hmm.
the six of us that are left, two in Grand Rapids, one's in Maryland, one's in Hawaii, one's in California, one's in Florida.
Okay.
So we don't get together that often.
Okay. Well, um, I know that you had talked with me and you had sent me some stuff. So, and I guess I should have asked you to do this, but you sent me something the other day. Do you have it around you? Do you have it around with you? Email me. Do you have it with you?
The email I just sent you.
Uh huh. Yes.
Yeah, I have to go away from the screen for a minute and
No,
get it.
no, 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 no. Okay, that's okay. I'll
I
see it.
pretty much, I pretty much remember what it said. I wrote it.
No, 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 no. I mean, I'll see if I can find it because I want to briefly talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Can you give us the title of what you wrote?
It's what are you gonna do with the time you have left, or how are you gonna spend the time you have left? It's addressed to the people of America based on what's going on and based on what I saw when I went up to Grand Rapids for my sister's funeral. It was just amazing.
So, you know, again, so what inspired you to write that? So, what are you going to do with the time left? So, what does that mean?
Well, when I went up, a lot that has to do with this here. When I went up there, last time I had been there and seen a lot of these people had been over 50 years ago. I moved away from there in 1966, but I go back now and then. But I seldom see other people. But for the funeral, she was there. I mean, many of them were there. I talked to them, and it's like they're still stuck in space. They're not. They haven't been anywhere. They haven't gone anywhere, and they're still reminiscing about what happened in 1960 and 58. And it's like, why are you still where you are? So what I try to do is ask them, don't stand there. Do something. The time we have left, because we're all the same age. I just turned 80. I have three brothers, two brothers over 80. I have a brother 90, a sister 87. So we're all getting up there in age. And some of these people who are my age, we're friends, and they're still stuck with where they are. And it's really bothered me that. So I kind of told them, what you need to do. And also I kind of combine that with what is going on in the country, because people do not believe what's going to happen is going to happen. And we'll talk about that later if you want to, but they just keep saying, oh, yeah, that's not going to happen. Well, they said it about January 6th. Okay, we know what happened. And as the people said, they did it, that was only a dress rehearsal for what's going to come up. And you think about what the government's doing, you think about all the laws they're changing to eradicate all the rights we've enjoyed for decades. And so you basically have to make your own life around yourself and your family and do the things that you want to do. You can't depend on other people to do all these things for you. And a lot of the things that you planned on or have been doing for years, you're not going to be able to do. So you're going to have to come up with a plan B because of the circumstances. And nothing would be worse than this person that's the governor of the state of Florida. He's just done everything he can do to take away every right we've ever had. He makes no bones about it because he wants to be the next president of the United States, and that will never happen.
Right. Well, see, and I was laughing when you were saying what you were saying. And the reason why I was laughing was because I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine. And we've been friends since junior high school. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, for her to be as old as she is, just having this conversation with her, and I've known something about her issues with her father. And that's been going on for years. And I started laughing because we were talking about her issues, right? And I stopped her, James. I didn't even let her finish. I stopped her. And and the reason why I stopped her, because she started to talk about, let me tell you the first thing that came out of her mouth, James. She started to talk about something that happened in third grade. And I said, stop. Stop. I don't even want to hear. You're sitting here at this day and this time, and you still in third grade. You still talking about what happened in third grade. And so what I said to her, I said, whatever's going on with you and your father don't have nothing to do with you and your father. I mean, doesn't have nothing to do with your father. You talking about third grade, girl,
Yeah,
right?
many years ago.
You still talking about something that happened in third grade?
Uh,
It's like there's something wrong. And so that's kind of similar to what you're talking about. And then I was talking to another friend, and the other friend was talking about her sister. Now, mind you, the two sisters are still hung up on something that happened 30 years ago because the mom put them out the house at a young age. And they still hung up on it. Something that happened 30 years ago. And so that's why I was laughing because I was just having that conversation with someone recently, and people are stuck and don't want to own their own responsibility of that they are in control of their lives. They are the determining factors of these things in what life is. Not your mom, not your dad, and all this other stuff. So, can you kind of again go into what you were talking about? Because that's why I started laughing when you said what you said.
Well, Charles, there's an old saying I repeat all the time. It says, if you always do what you've always done, you will always be where you've always been. And that's what it's all about. People just refuse to get comfortable and they stay here. And like I said, when I was in Grand Rapids, guys were telling me about this and this happened. And remember, we played football and I won that race. I said, well, I've been out of high school since 1961. You think I remember all that happened? Absolutely not. And for them, that's their life because they've done nothing. That's why I asked them, "What are you going to do with the time you have left?" And not to be a doomsday or whatever you want to call it. What the world has been since we were kids. I grew up in the early 40s and 50s. It's nothing like it is now, and it's not going to get any better. That's my prediction, and that's why I wrote. That's why in there I mentioned the things that I have done. I said, you look at your accomplishment and talk about them, but don't be boastful. I'm not boastful at all. I'll say, well, I did this, I enjoyed that. But I'm not saying, well, guess what? I did this. It's just in passing. These are the things that I enjoy. So I asked them to go back and ask themselves, what are the things they enjoyed? What did they do or accomplish that satisfies them? And what do you want to do before you go? And that's the question I posed to them.
And what generally is their response?
Well, I haven't sent it out. I just did it. I just finished. I haven't sent it out yet. But the ones I talked to,
Right.
they say, "Yeah, I guess I should. I probably, but you know, they're not going to do it. They haven't done it in 50 years. They sure so ain't going to do it now." But I put it out there for them to do. You know, don't just remember that you scored a touchdown in 59. What else have you done since then? What have you helped? Who have you done? What successes have you had? That's what you need to be thinking about, and not what somebody did to you. I have one negative that's still with me, and I'm still haven't got rid of it yet. I'm trying my best, but it's still there. But I don't go on and talk about it like I used to. So I can understand the fact some of these things can be there, but at some point you need to let them go.
Mm. Well, it's funny because as I sit here and I listen to you, and I'm I was thinking that when you were saying they were still talking about what happened when they was in 12th grade, right?
Right.
Right. Probably this is me because now I wish that I had Dr. Robinson on, the clinical psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably holding on to their only highlights they've had in their lives. They don't have any other highlights, so they hold on to those highlights because instead of making new highlights, they only got those. So they can only talk about those highlights because they don't have any others, so they hold on to them. That's just me guessing. You know,
But let's
so
see, I put that on them. Okay, I
right.
say that there. I have had at one time 11 brothers and sisters, raised by the same parents. We lived in the same house, and I think the first one left was 20 years old, so it's been quite a while. And some of us have been successful, and some of us have not done a thing. And I just understand we were given the path to follow. We were given the lessons of life, and some just simply ignored it and have done really nothing with her life. And I hate to say it, but my sister just passed away. She was this way. She just never went anywhere. She hardly ever left the house. And she was actually what we'd probably call a hermit. She just did not do anything. I don't know if she's ever even left the state of Michigan. And She was 74 years old. And I'm just saying there's so many people like that that stuck and they just will not move. But I say all that to say this. I listed some of the things that I accomplished that I never thought I would accomplish. And I said, I'm not boasting, but these are some of the things you should have done. If you haven't done them, you still got time left to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're going to have to do. You know, how much time? Right now, things are getting ugly. And like I said, they're going to get uglier in the next 4 years.
Uh, okay, and I know that's one of your passions about what you see forthcoming,
Yes.
and I know you talk about that a lot. You've been on this show, and you talked about that as well on numerous occasions. But there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. But every time you come on, I want the people to know um, about your book. Okay, and you can you can see it here.
Yes.
It's called A Shattered Dream. So I always like for you to briefly tell us about this book.
Okay. What the book was is a combination of my autobiography and also it talked about my years on the police department. It starts out saying at the beginning that I had to leave the job. I chose to leave the job before my full 25 years was up because of all the things that happened. And a relative of mine asked me, who cares about what you did 40 years ago? And that's the dumb title, The Shattered Dream of the Cop Who Never Was. You were a cop, yes, but I was not the cop I wanted to be. As a patrolman, as a sergeant, as a lieutenant, I spent more time battling with fellow officers and supervisors than I did police work. I did a lot of good police work, but there was just so much there, and it's still there. And I was trying to tell the people in the book that what happened 50 years ago is still going on today. I was patrolling the streets of Detroit in 1970. And the things that they're doing now, other officers around the country, even in Detroit and in other places, in my hometown, they executed a guy. The guy's going to jail for it. But nothing has changed. And this is the point I was trying to make in the book. You keep waiting for these things to change, but nobody's doing anything to make it change. And I did live my dream, but it wasn't the dream. The dream turned into a nightmare, I guess the best way to describe it.
Right. Um, I think people don't. For people who have not read the book, for the people who have not heard you on this show, I'm always, and I guess it's nothing new about what happened to you and what they tried to do to you, which was that they tried to harm you because you went against the grain. You was trying to do what was right.
Well, our parents, growing up in Grand Rapids, it's like growing up in Mayberry. For those of you who know what Mayberry is, Bonnie Fife, Goober, and the rest of them. We were slow, we were country, and I wanted to be a police officer. I moved to Detroit, taught school for 4 or 5 years, and then I finally said I want to do this, and I did it. It was the cost was
Mm.
just terrible, and I never fit in. The term comes to my mind. I was an anachronism. I did not fit with the era that's out there now, and the rules I tried to enforce, the discipline I administered for people that were officers that were abusing people, and I paid for it. And I got put on a detail that I never asked to. I thought it was an honor. And it turned out to be the worst assignment I ever had the whole time I was on the job. And during that time, I received, actually, the whole crew did, numerous death threats. They cut the brakes on my car. I almost crashed. They removed lug nuts from my car. My wheel was wobbling going down the highway at 70 miles an hour. And that's what they did because they did not like what I was doing. And I took a short leave of absence. When I came back, a very high ranking officer said to me, Crawford, I hear you're coming back. It's good. You're a great lieutenant. But the word is you are not willing to take one for the team. And if you're not, you never get promoted again while you're on this job. So what you're saying is that if I see somebody do something wrong or I beat somebody up, I'm supposed to let it go. If you look at the back page of my book, I talk about an incident where these officers, a sergeant and a patrolman, responded to a house fire, and the entire second floor was engulfed in flame. And some guy came out and jumped off the second floor porch. They told him to stop. He kept running, and they shot him. Well, there was no justification for that. They didn't know we have certain rules for which you can shoot somebody, but one of the things that says you must have make sure that a crime has been committed, and number two, there must be virtual certainty that this person committed the crime. Because the house was on fire does not mean it was arson. And because he ran, he might have been wanted on the warrant. He might have just been scared of the police. So my commander gave me the assignment and says, I want you to justify this shooting. I said, I can't. I said, I'm not going to go to court and lie when I'm called to testify. He said, well, this is one of my best charges, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I'm sorry, Commander, I can't do it. So he gave an assignment to another lieutenant. He justified all their actions. And not long after that, I was transferred to a new precinct. And that's what they did. I bounced around precinct like a ping pong ball, because I did what all the others didn't want me to do. They wanted me just to let everything go. And that's why the departments are where they are today. Let me just say one last thing about the police force, which we talk about all the time. And you can sit and think about what's one of my loyalty, I guess you have,
Right.
that the followers of the 45th President of the United States have. They've gone to prison for him. He's done everything. He faces indictments and all types of things, but he cannot do anything wrong. This is how it is with the police department. The police officers, the unions, the higher ups, and the prosecutors put that wall around the officers like the wall is around the 45th president. And to penetrate it is almost impossible. And then when the officers do go to trial, they're acquitted. And one of the ladies said to me, which I'm sorry, I read about, I'll never forget. This guy, he killed a guy. To me, it was an execution, the officer. He was found not guilty. And he interviewed the lady. She said this: our officers are out here every day risking their lives. And we're not going to send them to prison for doing their job. The guy should have done what he said. He wanted the guy to lay down in the dirt. The guy wouldn't do it. And they don't say anything. The guy tells you to lay down in the dirt in your Sunday suit, you'll do it. But the reason they can say that is because it does not happen to their children, their relatives. If we have black officers patrolling white areas and pulling over white teenagers and patting them down and shooting them in the back when they run, all hell would break loose. But that's not what happens when you turn around the other way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right because well, anyway, I won't go. There was so many things that you said there. When were there any other officers that you could have this discussion with, that you work with, that was as much as upset as you were?
Oh yeah, but they weren't. Thing is, they weren't willing to stick their neck out. They chose just to turn their head the other way or complain, and that's about it. But they did. They did not do anything about it actually. And I'll tell you this right now. For instance, the thing I have article I wrote called collateral damage. That's the name of it.
Hmm.
And it tells what an officer does. You hear all these people say this. I disagree with it. They said 90% of the officers are good officers. That's not a true statement. What they should say is probably 90% of the officers will not do what some of these officers do. But in my talk about collateral damage, I mentioned about two officers that pull a guy over for no reason, pat him down, he resists, he knows he's done nothing wrong. They end up tussling with the guy. He beat the snot out of him. And they go on the station, they tell our actions, Sergeant, oh, well, he was fit the description of somebody we were looking for, and we tried to talk to him. He resisted and came combative and blah, blah, blah. That's the story they told to the sergeant at the desk. Then they told a certain same story to the detectives who were going to investigate the case. They told the same story to the prosecutor. They told the same story to the jury, and the man went to prison. Okay? This is common. This is not uncommon. And so when he gets out of prison, when he's in prison, he loses his house, his wife, his kids, his job, car, everything. So when he gets back, he tries to get a job, and you have an application that says, have you ever been arrested for a felony? If he says no, and they find out he's gone. If he says yes, they say, well, what was it? Well, they claim I assaulted a police officer, but they lied on me. And you know what the boss will say about that? Yeah, right. Okay, thank you for the interview. And meanwhile, this guy now has no job. He's trying to make ends meet. His kids had to visit in jail, and that just has such a negative effect on him. But the so-called good officer saw what his partner did, heard his partner tell a lie, but because other officers were standing around listening to this, he chose to say, my partner did nothing wrong. And to me, that is not a good officer.
Now, recently, I think within the last week or so, maybe about 2 weeks, they decided not to indict the officers for the gentleman that was shot 46 times. Okay. When something like that happens, what is the conversation among law enforcement officers when a headline like that is in the news and then it comes back that here this guy was shot 46 times and now you know is you know he didn't have a I mean I'm not sure if you followed that case, but then it comes back that they're not going to indict the officers. What usually the conversation is uh, among
Well,
police officers?
a lot of them say, feel this way, it's terrible. Hey, the guy, like the lady, the jury said, well, he should have stopped. He shouldn't run from the police. We had one here even in Orange County where they pulled, claimed the guy was trying to run over the officer. They shot at his car 126 times. We had another one where the guy's car backfired. They thought it was a gunshot. He took off, and they chased him and said he was shooting at him, and they fired out of how many shots. There was something like 20 officers involved. And the guy and the passenger, female, they were killed, and the car crashed. And after they crashed, because obviously they were dead, but you can tell, you can't prove it. One officer jumped out of the hood of the car and fired 15 more shots into their bodies. He was not indicted because the prosecutor says of all the shots that hit him, something like 40 something shots, they could not say the shot that the officer fired was the one that killed him. So he was never indicted. And these things happen, and people don't understand why we're so angry.
Yeah, I've never asked this question, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's the exact same thing. What did they say when they did indict the police officers that beat up Rodney King? What was the conversation among cops or your fellow cops, or what would they be talking about? I know it's the
Well,
same thing.
back then they were angry. Watch this, and some of them got, I guess, trying to take a little revenge or whatever, but they still, if it would have defended the officers, I think. Some of them would, I would say that the percentage of criticize the officers for what they did to Rodney King would be higher than normal, but it would not probably be the majority.
What's the beef? Won't you talk about the beef among police officers? Because there's always, regardless of what workplace you're in, there's always a beef between white people, black people, different races. Can you briefly just talk about the beef among police officers in the workplace? Because that's just naturally who we are. But more so, can you just give us an insight on what it's like?
Well, there's a lot of attention, and a lot of people, officers, black and white, just kind of ignore it. They see things the officers do they don't like. Someone will say, "Don't do that again," and that's the end of it. And between white and officers and black officers, you just see the tension. And white officers have no problem using the so-called N-word. And I don't like to say the N-word. I like to say exactly what the word is. It's vile and it's evil. And
Hmm.
this is what they do. They get these big arguments about this, about there's this organization called Black Lives Matter. And when I'm growing up, I'll just say this, and even recently, black lives don't matter, even when it comes to black officers. The one that shot these guys in, I think it was in Tennessee. And back, I mentioned this earlier, that we had a force in Detroit Police Department. They were doing a good job. They had a lot of robberies and stuff like that. They were working undercover, pretending to be drunks and old women. When a guy tried to rob them, they would arrest him. That was it. But then all of a sudden they began to shoot him. And they shot 21 people in 2 years, and only one was white. And every officer that fired a shot, except for one, was white. And that's what it was. And when you saw them on the station, and a lot of these guys I was in the academy with, and they were after the shooting, they come to the report in the station, sit down to do the report, just smiling like, "Yeah, I lit his ass up," and blah blah blah. It's like they did everything but give each other a high five because it really didn't matter. And back then with the police department in Detroit, I don't think they have it anymore. Now the guys put out administrative duty. When you had a fatal shooting as a Detroit police officer in the 70s, you automatically are taken off the street, off out of the precinct for 5 days while they investigate and they determine whether to bring you back. Well, some guys would shoot somebody, kill somebody, and say, "Well, at least you get your 5 days." That's crazy. And one last thing is that every year, Detroit had the supposedly record of the murder capital of the world. And towards the end of the year, at my precinct, the 10th precinct, they actually had a poll to see how many people, not necessarily killed by police officers, how many people will be murdered in Detroit by the end of the year. That little pot. And whoever came the closest without going over won the pot. So, I mean, life isn't a damn thing. They're trying to win this pot. And these are little things that by themselves may seem minor, but when you add all these things together and they're doing it all over the place, you see a whole different picture.
Wow, that is. I was recently, over the last maybe 2 or 3 months, there are quite a few different series on YouTube. There's one is called the Lackluster Channel, one is called Audit the Auditor, and there's quite a few others. And James, what they do is that they highlight stories of police stops, and then they highlight people who know their rights. And what I've learned, and you probably can speak on this, what I've learned in watching these series of all these stops, I mean hundreds of stops, all kind of encounters, from regular stops to police stopping police officers. And I can go in because I've sat and watched so many of them. And there's some people who actually do this for their channel, and they go around with their camera, and they're purposely having these encounters with law enforcement officers just to see if they understand the Constitution. Okay, there's
Mhm.
some who walk around and they're outside videotaping the police department, and the police comes outside, and some of them are very familiar with some of them, and they go, "Oh, that's this guy, so he's going to be," and some of them, and you realize this is kind of like a two-part question. One is to see all these stops and starting to better understand what they're trying to emphasize and point out in law enforcement, how a lot of them don't even know the laws. A lot of police officers don't even know the laws. And they're, of course, you talk about this, they're trying to force their will. Well, I'm a police officer, you need to do what I say. And then they emphasize what the laws are, and they like, no. And on many occasions, they go, I want to see your 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 captain, or I want to see your lieutenant, I want to see your sergeant, or whatever. On numerous occasions, the sergeant will come out and tell the police officer, this guy's not doing anything wrong. Let him go. Then there's some who come out and even the sergeant don't even know the laws, the constitutional laws. And James, it's very common, and I have learned this. They are sued constantly. Law enforcement, the city, and all of them, they are constantly dishing out money. They're losing all of these cases for the people who understand the laws, who finds a very good lawyer, and they dishes out millions of dollars every year. And I guess they and, and for some of the police officers, some of them do get fired, but then they go and get hired like the next county over.
Absolutely.
Right. They get hired the next county over. I just recently saw a case where this mother was with her two daughters. They was going to the daughter's graduation. They pulled up to a Dunkin' Donut. They were standing there getting ready to get out of the car to go get some coffee. And it turned into something crazy where they forced the mother and the two daughters, they was people of color, and how they treated them. And it was so crazy. They won a $10 million lawsuit for something as simple as she was saying, I'm sitting here, and they were just regular people just sitting there in the car just because they had been driving for a long period of time to go to the graduation. Now they're stopped at the Dunkin' Donuts getting ready to go and get a cup of coffee to go to the graduation. And she was trying to explain the situation. We're just here, we're tired, we're getting ready to go get some coffee, and just regular stuff. And they forced their will on them. They end up dragging them out of the car, and I think they may have tased one of the daughters, and they won a $10 million lawsuit. And I'm seeing stuff like that all the time where the city and law enforcement it's just a normal thing for them to just dish out money. And it's almost like it's more important for them to dish out the money than to try to get it right for some odd reason. And it's what you say all the time. One of the other things that took place, one of the law enforcement officers is now being investigated over the period of years because what they also show on the channels is because they're always showing the body cam video. And some of them encourage and show because they videotape their own. And sometimes they can't get the body cam. They say something happened to it. And then example, James, was they did an investigation. And the guy had his camera. They were basically, there was these guys playing on the streets at like this downtown event. Cops came over and told them that they couldn't play, which they later found out that the cops had it all wrong. They could play. They wasn't doing anything wrong, right? Right? So that came out in the court that these guys had all the rights to do what they was doing. The cops violated their rights. But the guy camera who was videotaping, all his camera disappeared. And you can see on the body cam that the sergeant took the camera and They asked five of the police officers, why did you guys stop taping? Because the sergeant told us to. So you stopped taping because the sergeant told you to? Yes. Went to the sergeant. Did you tell them to stop videotaping? No, I did not. Do you know what happened to the camera? I mean, to his phone? No, I don't. And he was the last one in possession of it, as you can see on the body cam after they stopped taping. Now he said, no, I didn't tell him. But you had five police officers to come in and say, we stopped taping because the sergeant told us to stop taping. And so the investigation was such that, again, it's constantly showing the issues and the problems that we have in this country when it comes to law enforcement. And I was saying that one of the one of the police officers was heard on camera, and this is what he said. He said, 20 years ago, we would have had him on the ground stomping him and then probably done shot his butt. But now, because we got these darn cameras, things ain't like what they used to be. So when they heard him say that, now they got to go back and look at all his cases from the last 20 years. Because he revealed his mindset and what probably has been going on. So I said, when he said that, I said, boy, I can't wait to share this shit with James. Because how do you think, even though you kind of talked about it, that very little will change, that they have the body camera, but how you think law enforcement, the police officers feel about the body cameras now?
Well, they don't like them. That's why they disable them all the time. And oddly enough, you read a report that the camera was working just before he shot the guy, then it stopped. Then afterwards, the guy is laying on the ground, the camera suddenly comes back on. They know how to disable them without any problem. They know what to tape and what not to tape. They hate the body camera. Some say, "Oh, we like them because they show us to be innocent." But you take the ones that show them to be innocent, and the ones that show that they did what they were accused of doing. I don't think the comparison will be close. I don't have the statistics to show that, but they don't want the body cameras. They don't want things. And you mentioned about the sergeant coming out and all that. This is what I mentioned earlier. The sergeants, lieutenants, the prosecutors, they all are in this thing to make sure that nothing bad happens to the officer. If you, as a private citizen, Charles Morris, get in an argument with Henry Jones and Henry reaches in his back pocket, you pull out a gun and shot him, and you say, well, I thought he was reaching for a weapon. As a civilian, they go find every kind of reason to prosecute you. But if a police officer said, I feared for my life, that's why I shot him, boop, it's over. They don't even try to do any more investigation because that's the way it is. Okay, that's what you're doing. He can do that. Police officers have the greatest power of anybody in the world to be judge, jury, and executioner all in one incident. And nobody else can do that. And they don't want to be sued. The cities are getting sued for millions, but they keep letting the officers do the same thing. Another thing you mentioned earlier that guys go from department to department. They tracked a few of them years back. They got fired here for abuse. They went here. They got fired for abuse, and there's no network, and they don't want that network. It says this guy is a bad guy. Don't hire him unless he just out and out just beating the hell out of people, didn't cost the city millions, and that might be. But as a rule, you're going to want to join another department. You can do it. It's
Well,
not monitored.
yeah.
No kind of, also, another thing that's not monitored too is the complaints. Because some of the departments will not let you look at complaints against officers. You cannot review them. If you review them, you'll find some officers had 8 and 10 complaints and they're still out there on the street. But you cannot go back. And they have this, I'm trying to think of the first word, immunity. You cannot sue a police officer individually. You can sue the department. And they know that you can't sue him, take his house, his car, everything else, but you can sue the department. And I'm trying to think what's called, not diplomatic, it's some type of immunity. It'll come to me in a minute. And they have that, and they rely on that. Know that they personally cannot be sued for their action. If they do something bad, cost money, the city is going to pay for it, or the county, or whoever.
Right. I do encourage people to go online, and even you can look up audit the auditor, audit the audit, and one is called the Lackluster Channel, and there's quite a few others who constantly showing encounters with law enforcement, and it's interesting because I guess I'm used to it now, especially after talking and seeing all the things, and they show all these different scenarios. Some of them are good because there are some scenarios. One that was funny, one that was funny, and you probably could relate to this, James. This guy was a contractor, and they was building houses in this new suburb, and a cop came by and saw this guy and his wife working. Um, he he had the supplies in his truck, and he was just working on the house. And so the cop stopped him and was asking for papers, and the guy was trying to show him, look, I worked all over these, you know, this, this area, and I got supplies here, and I got this, and the cop was like just giving him a hard time. And he even called, and he said, look on the paper. Look at this guy's name. Look at the number I'm calling. He put him on speakerphone, and the guy name and number that was on the contractor's contract was speaking to the officer on the speakerphone and was telling him, hey, this is my guy. This is what we do. And the guy that they stopped said, like, if you saw me up there on the roof doing stuff on the roof, would you stop me now? You just see me here and I'm doing this, and you saw me ripping, because what he was doing, he was taking the boxes that the stuff came in, and he was tearing down the boxes to put them in the dumpster. That's really all he was doing. But I say all of this right here to say that they had this encounter. They had this encounter, and then two more police officers came. And so, the cop that stopped him, they was going back and forth, going back and forth. And then there was another cop in the front of him. There was another cop in the back of him, right? And they was going at it for at least like an hour. Okay. And the guy said, I'm not giving you my name. I don't have to. I haven't done anything wrong. I know my rights. And he had encounters before because he kept telling the cop, man, you guys did this to me. You guys did that to me. I missed work because you guys accused me of stuff I didn't do. So he had a real attitude towards you guys always doing me wrong. And I know my rights. And I say this to say this here, James. One of the police officers, you could tell, he even went up to him and he said, hey man, you want some water? Yeah, here's some water. Hey man, and the other police officer was just trying to be friendly to him and help him out as much as possible, because when it was all said and done, he was letting him know, I really don't want to be here. I gotta be here because this guy, he didn't say this, but this is what he meant. Because this guy's being a jerk, which is, he was talking about the other police officer. And when it was all said and done, he was like, okay, man, I'm ready to go. I just gotta be here because this is what I gotta do. But I really don't want to be here because I know this guy's being a jerk. But he was quiet, like he was just sitting back, just waiting for it to all be over. And he was like, look, I know this guy's a jerk. I'm glad it's over. Okay, go on, go on about your day. Go and finish doing your work. Bye. And he like shook his hand. Have a nice day.
But Charles, there's so much of that that's come on. I'm still going back to the 45th president. In one of the articles I wrote, I said that there's three things you can't do physically. Number one, you cannot call back a bullet once it's fired. You cannot unring a bell once it's been rung. And you cannot, figuratively speaking, put the genie back in the bottle. Number 45, let the genie out. And these are not, I think I said they weren't really genies, they were jackasses out of the bottle. And they now think there's nothing they can do wrong, and they're getting away with it. I think you've seen here where a man, I think he was a professional doctor or something. His neighbor's on vacation and he's watering his lawn, the man's lawn, the neighbor's lawn. The lady called the police on him. They came out and want to know why he was watering this lawn. And he said, I live across the street. And the lady had to have seen him. And they got into an argument, and the man was arrested for resisting an officer. Who is going to break into a house and water the lawn? Nobody. But they investigate these. They do this in apartment buildings. People say, officer, I don't think he belongs here. Uh, Check him out. And you have to show them identification. You really don't have to. You have to identify yourself. You have to do that. But you have to say, well, here's my license. No, you don't. But you have to do that. And a lot of this stuff, believe it or not, Charles, comes from television. These cop stories, I mean, I've watched some of them. I had to quit watching them because what happens, people are beginning to think that what happens on these shows happens in real life on police department. They don't. They don't. The things that they do, and one of the things that um, is the reading your Miranda rights. No one ever talks about this. The guidelines for reading the Miranda rights is when your investigation goes from investigatory to accusatory, that is when you read him the rights. But if you just talking to the guy, well, did you see this? You don't have to. But people say, oh, yes, you do. And they also say, well, I didn't get my phone call. Well, I checked. I haven't checked everybody, but that is a department policy. I have never seen a law. You can check it, and those who view this can check it. Says lawfully you must give a prisoner a phone call. That is a department procedure policy. And there's just so many of them out there that people see having on TV and think, well, this is the way it is, but it's not. It's just not. And one of the things that when you have people, officers pull a guy over and getting a harassment or chase, he said, why did you stop him? He said, well, he fit the description of a guy we're looking for. Okay, someone had to give that description. But no one asked, well, what was the description? Who gave it? Was he tall? Was he short? Was he this? Was he that? No one asked these questions. They just accept the fact that, I'm talking about supervisors, that, or even some of the people, that, well, he fit the description. And that's it. That's all they have to say. And that justifies that stop. The guy they were talking about probably never even existed.
Well,
Okay?
I want to ask you this before we leave. After watching the YouTube channels, and there's a constant back and forth between my constitutional rights, are how much does the department, and is it important that the uh, officers know the Constitution, understand the Constitution? Some of them care, some of them know, some of them don't know, some of them don't have a clue. But how much time and effort is put into that for the cops to understand people's constitutional rights?
Well, I was in the academy over 50 years ago, so I don't know what they're doing now. But if they are teaching it, they aren't exercising. They act like they don't know the rights, and there's certain things you can do, you can't do, and it's just I don't think they're getting the training. And right
Right.
now, I know you watch these shows, and I had to quit watching. I had to quit reading these stuff on the headlines on the internet because I see all these little things. Teachers call, put the black kids and got the lunch last, the white kids got the lunch first. This officer, it's just there because no one wants to say this, and I'll say it. People say what they want to say. United States of America is one of the most racist countries in the world.
Yeah, but everybody know that. You,
Nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants
who don't know that? Everybody knows that, James. And then one of the things they always say is people who come to this country from other places, that's one of the first things that they recognize being here in the United States. If they come from somewhere else, that they always say that's one of the first lessons that they learn. Period.
to.
So yeah, that's a given.
Yeah.
ain't no if and ands or buts about that. But I wanted to ask you something else in reference to law enforcement because, again, after watching this channel, and you know, if you ever have time, just go on there and put in audit the audit, and it'll bring up audit the audit, the lackluster channel, and a few of the others of these encounters of law enforcement. And some of them are good, some of them are bad. Like everything else, you got some good law enforcement, you got some good supervisors that come out and they and some of them actually embarrass the cops because they tell them like, "Oh, you're not doing anything wrong. Let him go," and they just leave. And then some of them just go off on the cops. See, you know, they cuss them out and they did it. One, one. There's several cops that stop
But
people.
Kyle said, and let's get to but the same supervisor that says you were wrong, blah blah blah. He is going to catch hell when he gets back to the station, and they're going to talk about it. There's a network between departments and between officers, and they tell you if I decide to transfer to, let's say, the 10th precinct, and they know I'm coming in, this is I don't know if they do it anymore or not. They used to check and see how I was. If the people at the other precinct I left say, "Oh, he's a tight guy, he's good," blah blah blah, they would treat you like a king. They say, "Oh no, he's a tells, he's a snitch, he's not gonna back you up." They're gonna treat you like dirt. It's just that simple. It's that complicated. I mean, that simple. Said the thinking is just so. I don't know how to describe it. Just they're not thinking. They're just going on their emotions. And you might be one of the greatest cops, but you got the reputation of not going along with the program that's wrong, and you're going to pay that price for that.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, again, I encourage people to go on and check out the lackluster or the audit and quite a few of the others because it's extremely educational in the sense of, oh, this is what I was going to say is that like the audit is very detailed. And that's what I like. It's very detailed. And it goes to all the different laws in a different state. It'll tell you what state is a stop and identify state. It'll tell you what state when you don't have to identify yourself. It will tell you under each circumstances, and it'll tell you line for line, and they'll show you the law, and they'll tell you good, bad, or indifferent when this cop is wrong, when you're wrong, when you misunderstood the law, when the cop misunderstood the law, and they'll break it down to say under these circumstances, you didn't have to identify yourself. They'll tell you, well, probably under these circumstances, the judge, the court may have said you needed to identify yourself. So it breaks it down so you can better understand state by state how the laws are different and when you do or don't, or when you should have had to identify yourself, are one of the most key things that they tell you, James. Don't say anything. The less you say, the better. And they also show you how cops try to lure you into stuff with questionings, but they said this.
It says you have a right to remain silent. That's what you do. That's exactly what you do. But the thing is, getting back to what you're saying is, they know that these are not right. They know it's not constitutional, but they continue to let them happen. What it's called past practice. A lot of cases are won on past practice. If for the last 23 years you've been doing it this way, but you should not have been, and someone does it, they say, well, past practice has been we've always done this way, so I'm going to say you shouldn't have done that because we've always done it the way, although it was wrong way. Because past practice says this is how it's been, and this is why the officers are doing this way. And although you might be right, we're still going to find that you didn't do what you're supposed to do.
Right, and you can see even whether it's locally. I've seen cases here in Orlando. I've seen cases in Florida, but I've seen cases. I mean, James, they show all kinds. They shows where, like, an off-duty cop is being stopped, and the cop says, "You stopped me because I'm black," and
Mhm.
then I've seen them take police officers to court. I've seen all of that is on there. This was the body cam. He stopped the police officer, and they stopped one police officer. He was in uniform. He get, he was a black guy. He was on his way to his job. They pulled him over. He got out in uniform, and they still acting like he was like regularly dressed like me, and they treated him, So, but then there was another one where they stopped. They stopped him, and they eventually let him go. But when he got back in the car, the one of the white cops called him like a stupid N-word, blah 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 blah, and it's on the camera, and he ended up suing him. It's dumb, dumb. They call him a dumb A and da da da, stupid, and but it's all on there, and I know you're not surprised by any of it, but it can be very entertaining, but you're also
Well,
learning.
I know what you're saying, and probably a lot of people that don't know probably should read it. But these are things I went through for almost 20 years, and I know how they are. And the little things that you're seeing right now that you see on this channel, that maybe be one or two places. But just think about this: there are 18,000 police departments in this country, and they have three shifts. So you do the math, and most of them have three or four, 5,000 officers. And these things happen day in and day out simply because of the numbers. And so I don't even look at it because I've seen them too many times live. And so I don't really care to read about it. And there's a lot of these things where the teacher did this, the teacher did that. And I look at it, I don't finish the article. I just look at the headline because I know what it is. And some of these programs they have, the story of so and so, or Emmett Till and all this, I wouldn't watch that. I was around when Emmett Till was killed. I was a teenager. And
Hmm.
I don't want to read a story about somebody lynching a black man and hanging him off a tree. I don't want to watch that. So I don't.
Right.
So those that don't know or have not experienced, this would be a good technique to let you find out. But for those of us that are out here and are doing the job and been through all of this, it's nothing new. It's nothing new at all.
Well, James, honestly, we didn't really go into what we really want to talk about today because I do have your email up, and before we leave, just give us a brief something on what are you going to do with the time you have left. That's originally what we started talking about because I see right here where it says when the 46th president of the United States celebrated his 80th birthday on November 20th, 2020, historic and recording setting day for an American president. We did not see many on the air, accolades or much fanfare about his reaching this milestone, not the accomplishment and contributions he has made over the past 40 plus years to the country he loves so dearly. We're not reminded of his attempts to protect America from those home and abroad, whose ultimate goal is to destroy American democracy, plus, politically and military. And you went on to write this, and you were talking about. Let me see if I go down here to your bucket list. Let me see if I can find it. You said okay, one of your bucket lists was to live to be 80 years old. I am a father, grandfather, great grandfather, graduate from high school, junior college, and received a bachelor's degree. Taught high school. Oh, see, I did not know this. I did not know this. You taught high school biology and coached a
Yes.
championship cross country team.
Mhm.
Attended my childhood dream of being a police officer, retiring as a lieutenant, who wrote two books, has visited 49 of the 50 states, plus Mexico, Puerto Rico, and a dozen Caribbean islands, sailed down the river Nile in Jordan and fish. Oh, did you catch any fish? And I'm just reading a few that you wanted to talk about. What are you going to do with the time you have left? So just briefly end us with why you thought that was so important. And you said you just encountered going home, and unfortunately, you just lost your sister who was 75 years old. And we started off the show talking about, you were saying that there's a lot of people you grew up with still stuck where they are. So, won't you kind of close us out on why you think it's so important
Well, it's
to,
important to live. There's a
yeah.
quote in there, I don't have it in front of me right now, where the guy says, basically, it's never too late to start what you always wanted to do. And I say that for somebody that has not done, they may not be able to do everything they wanted to do, but there's some things you can do that are within your reach, and you should do them. I've told some friends of mine that if you always wait until you can afford it, you would never go. Now, of my 11 siblings, like I said earlier, that I was raised the same way they have, and only maybe one or two have done or been the places I have been and enjoyed what I've enjoyed. And that was their choice. And now people have a choice. What's going to happen, and I hate to say it, but if things don't change, I said this is a miracle or divine intervention. This United States of America, we've known it for 200 plus years, will be under an authoritarian rule. You're seeing it step by step every single day. And I put in there and also a quote from Maya Angelou. It says, if people show you who they are, believe them. The government, the police department, all these agencies have shown us who they are, but we keep thinking it's going to change. It's like watching an instant replay over and over and hoping if you watch it enough times, the results are going to change. It's not. Things are not going to change. Sorry to say that.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on the Journey 2020. You always, you know, answer the phone, always on call when I ask you to come on the show, and you always give some great insight on something that will always be puzzling to us, and we can better understand why. And there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to any of it. And again, I do encourage people to go and check this out. What is it called again, James?
Shattered dream, the conflict never was. And in there, it tells you, it gives people insight of what happens inside the police department that never is seen by the public. How the cover ups are, how the officers do certain things that are illegal, how they do this and that and the other, but it never makes the headlines. And that's what it's all about. And I tried to stop it, and I just didn't belong. I was in the department I didn't belong in, and I paid the price.
Wow. Well, that's part of it when we try to do the right thing. That's a whole nother show, and trying to having this
Yeah,
country in the right place, trying to do the right thing. That's a whole nother show. But again, thank you for being who you are. Thank you for the effort that you put forth, and thank you for just being James Crawford.
thank you.
All right, and this is the Journey 2020, where we come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. And for questions, comments, or concerns, you can always hit us up with an email. And you may have a show idea, and you may want to get in touch with the Mr. Crawford here. And maybe there's some questions that I didn't ask that you would like for Mr. Crawford to answer for yourself. It's always good when we can have better insight to help us better understand. And we've talked about this 1,000 times. You've actually been part of my summit when I've been talking to our young people what to do in case you're stopped by law enforcement. You covered this on this show on more than one occasion, and we can never talk about it enough. So maybe again, we can come back and address that as well. So as I covered your bucket list, as you trying to say that it's never too late, and there's a saying, just trying to live my best life is what we're trying to do. So again, thank you again, and I'm sorry to hear about your sister, and blessings to you and the wife. Tell her I says hi, and we got to go fishing sometime real soon.
Yeah, but you throw yours back. I don't throw mine back. And listen, unless it's so small as wearing a diaper, then I'll throw it back.
Okay.
But
All right.
I'm
All right.
not going back.
All right. James Crawford here on the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris. As I say, uh, the word comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. Enjoy the rest of the week, people. Everybody, you be blessed.